Hi, everyone, and welcome to the extremely grainy picture that for some reason on my new computer is just as it is. Now, I do have to tell you that I have two little girls next to me here. One of them belongs to me, the other one does not. But we had a sleepover last night and they insisted on saying hello, even though they're still in their pajamas. Say hi, Leah.
Hello.
Say hi, Zoe.
Hi.
So they had a pajama party and now they're going to go do their own thing at their own desk in this office. Right, ladies?
Yes.
Okay. So there you go. There's your good morning for a Friday. For some reason, I'm sorry, it's afternoon. It's 1:23 in the afternoon. They are still in their pajamas. I just wanted to tell you that. The reason I'm recording this video is because I wanted to just tell you a couple of things and I wanted to do it quickly. And sometimes that's hard to do when there's a 10-year-old around, and also sometimes hard to do when there's somebody making noises, and sometimes hard to do via typing. So the first thing is that, as you all know, your test is going to be put up, and it's going to be put up today. And the reason why I was holding off on that was because I was too busy yesterday to get it up for you properly, and I wanted to make sure that I did. The second reason is because I wanted to tell you, somebody had asked for a review, and I was sort of like, you should know, but then I was like, no, there's no reason for you to necessarily know that. So I'm going to quickly run down the things that, generally speaking, will be on the exam, and that will hopefully help you in looking for answers, because as you know, you have as long as you want, but you can only do this in one take. So I just want to prepare you as much as possible. This test is just to make sure that you're getting the basics that you need to get from your book. And I know some of you had some issues with the readings and the sort of page numbering. So what I'm also doing is putting up online in your announcements a picture of, or I should say a couple pictures of my book from, let's see, this is edition 2, which I believe is what the syllabus is made off of. Apparently, I did not pick up the new book to make this particular syllabus. So this will be volume number 2 or edition number 2. Most of you are working with edition number 3. All you have to do is look at the page numbers on this syllabus that I have assigned, see what they correlate to in edition 2, and find that correlation in edition 3. That sounds a lot more complicated than it actually is. Example, if some of the page numbers referred to the encomium on Helen in the second edition, then you would read the encomium on Helen in the third edition wherever it appears, which will be roughly in the same chronological order as we're going, because as I told you, we would start in the beginning with the ancient Greeks about 400 BCE, and then we would move all the way into our current time period. Now, if you're wondering, hey, why is it taking so long? We're only in the medieval period. Really, we're barely about to hit the Renaissance, and our exam only covers the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans, and the medieval period. And the answer is because the medieval period, depending on which historian you talk to, took anywhere from 8 to 1600 years. 800 years is nothing to sniff at. 1600 is even obviously double that. So anything in between, which I usually settle somewhere around a number of 1200 years, between 400 and 1600, even though that's the case, we've got a lot of time to cover. What we don't have is a lot of rhetoricians or a lot of rhetorical theory that is progressing or advancing for the obvious reasons, as noted in my lectures and in the book introductions to each of those time periods, that during the fall of the Holy Roman Empire, when the Catholic Church took over, really, we had no need for exploration of truth or philosophy or anything else. So that's why it takes so long sometimes. And my device is telling me that it's my laptop and it's yelling at me about my virus protection. And so my antivirus protection is that I'm not going outside, I think, at this point. So you should look for that picture to help you out. I know I was typing them up there for a while. I typed them up for you the first time around. That was really tedious and kind of silly when I could just put up a photo for you and it would be a lot easier and more accurate. So we'll do that. Now, for your exam, which you are going to have a week to take, it's up for an entire week. So when I put it up here today, which will be this afternoon, you'll get a notice, and you will have until next Friday at whatever time I get this done and up to take it. You can take it any time in there that you want. Obviously, it's open book since you're at home. Obviously, you can look at notes. Obviously, you can relook at lectures, I guess, if you want to. But ultimately, these are things that I need you to know in order to write your second paper and in order for you to actually, be able to pass this class knowing the basics of what you need to know. I'm just trying to get you to a certain level of understanding. So here's that list. And if you have any questions about these, even when the exam is up, I don't care. Ask me the question you want to ask me and I will answer. So here are the things that you need to know. You need to know what an encomium is. You need to know what was said at the end of the encomium in what's known as the epilogue, excuse me. You need to know what Gorgias said in there about Helen and about writing that encomium. The next thing, you need to understand who Plato was, what type of system Plato believed in. Did he believe that rhetoric was truth, led to truth? Where did he stand on that? Where did he stand on rhetoric and philosophy, the study of life? Did he believe that rhetoric was good or bad? If he believed that rhetoric was good or bad, why? Why was it good or bad? And you don't need to know like in-depth philosophical detail there. I'm just looking for a few ideas. And you also need to understand that Plato was in fact Aristotle's teacher. And that's important because Aristotle is going to say some of the opposite things of Plato. When you read Plato, I don't remember if I have you reading the Phaedrus or not. If I do, please don't get confused. Plato is not arguing that there are good things about rhetoric. He is saying, look what I can do with rhetoric, and that's what's making it bad. Okay? So make sure that you don't get confused on that if I have you reading it, which at the moment I can't remember if I have you reading that one or a different work, to be honest with you. Okay, the next thing that you need to do is be able to compare Aristotle and Plato in some ways. Did Aristotle believe that rhetoric was good? What types of system of government did Aristotle believe in? Did Aristotle think that rhetoric was related to philosophy? Did Aristotle believe that rhetoric led to truth? Some other things from Aristotle are very, very important. Obviously, he wrote literally the book called On Rhetoric, which is kind of key and important, right? So the things that we need to get from that are the two types of reasoning that he talks about. And this is a lot of twos and threes, and I apologize, but the two types of reasoning that he talks about, the two types of proofs that he talks about, the three genres or categories for rhetoric, which is the epideictic, the ceremonial or epideictic is what we call it, the deliberative and the forensic. Okay, so those are those three genres. They call them something else in the book, and I just don't remember what it is. It might be three types of rhetoric. I call them genres. The next is from Aristotle. We also need to understand that the proofs coming in two forms, that inartificial proofs are different from artificial proofs. And he lists three very specific artificial proofs because those come from the human being. So as I said in my lecture about this, we need to understand those three artificial proofs very, very well because we need all three of them to persuade. Aristotle's definition of rhetoric is absolutely key, which is one of the first things I told you, the art or skill of knowing in any particular instance all the means of persuasion. In whatever order you have that, there's three parts: the art or skill of knowing, and then in all situations or in a particular situation, all the means of persuasion. And those three parts are very, very important. I don't care what order they're in or how you word it, but those three are the key. And so you need to know that definition. You also need to understand that Aristotle did not come up with the 5 canons of rhetoric. Okay, he actually only stated these things. He said, well, there's tropes and figures, there's topics, there's deduction and reasoning, there's also different types of argument, There's proofs for those arguments. One of the types of arguments that he talks about that's really super important is the enthymeme. So make sure that you find that. Aristotle said it's the most common form of argument that is key to understanding, especially in today's world. If you think about memes, granted, this is not related in any way, that enthymeme and meme, they just happen to have the same name for some reason. But if you think about it, if you can use it as a mnemonic device, an enthymeme is an argument where we assume people know part of the argument already and agree to it. So just like a meme, when you look at a picture, you have to know all the people in the picture in order to understand the saying, right? And that's what makes it a meme. So it's an argument in sort of that shortened form of the enthymeme. You also need to understand from Aristotle ethics, goodwill, and why those things are important to his audience. All right. I'm just covering over the major areas of things that I can remember. I won't say that only this will be on the exam, but it'll be close enough that you'll be able to flip through your book or something to find the answers when you need them. Understand that during the time of Plato was Isocrates, and we always put him like last in the list of the Greeks, but he's actually not. He was probably a contemporary of Plato more than Aristotle, but they did have competing schools. And Isocrates he started out as a sophist, of course. So he and Plato already disliked each other. And they had different ideas about how rhetoric worked. But Isocrates also had different ideas from Plato in some small, minor ways. I believe I had you read Antidosis and On the Sophists, and he tells us why the sophists were bad. And that's really important because he was a sophist. And then he also defends himself, which the art of rhetoric really began with the idea of attacking and defending. So attacking somebody's character and defending your character or their character. And so in here we have that from Isocrates. We don't have a whole lot more from Isocrates, but hopefully in the introduction you got a little bit more about him. And then finally, in the classical Greeks, we talk about the sophists because they started way before anybody else. Gorgias was a sophist, and of course, sophists were paid money to either teach you how to speak in a particular situation or they spoke for you. So they are what we would modernly call lawyers and teachers for that reason. A lot of this should be repeat. And then after we move out of the Greek era, after Alexander the Great was exiled, we move into the Roman era. And of course, we have two main characters here, Cicero and Quintilian. What's important here is understanding that they lived in two different governmental systems at two different times. Cicero 100 BCE, Quintilian 100 CE. So they actually lived 200 years apart approximately. And so reading about them, you have to understand the governmental system in which they were speaking. The Roman Empire and the Roman Republic are two very, very different things. And that dictated what they wrote about and how they wrote. Cicero is the one who is credited with coming up with the 5 canons of rhetoric: inventio, dispositio, elocutio, memoria, and actio. Those are the, I believe, Latin or Italian. Oh, terrible with this. Those, I believe, are the Latin words that he wrote, which, of course, we now call invention, arrangement, style, memory, and delivery. Your book may list it as delivery, memory. Those two at the bottom there, it doesn't really matter. These are the 5 keys to understanding how rhetoric works. And you have to have these 5 parts in order to be successful. So how they treat the 5 canons. A lot of times people will talk about Cicero writing the textbook for a public speaking class, and Quintilian wrote the teacher's handbook to go along with it. And there's a very important reason why there, and it's about their governmental systems. Some other things that you need to understand are the 3 styles of narrative, 3 types of narrative. That would be important for you to understand, as well as Cicero's definition of a rhetorician. And those are key to understanding the Roman era And reading about Cicero's death might be super helpful to you. There's actually movies about it. They cut out his tongue, they took off his hands, and they put his head on a pike outside of the Senate. And the reason for doing that was because they felt that his power came from his tongue and from his hands. In other words, language, communication was the most powerful thing. Now, if you want the soap opera version, Cleopatra was involved and asked for his head. The more accurate historical version probably has nothing to do with that. But they say that the day that Cicero died was the day that the Roman Republic died. And Quintilian thought that Cicero was the greatest orator of all time. Even though he didn't know him, he read about him and knew his works. Finally, that moves us into another 8 to 1600 year period known as several different names, the medieval period, the Dark Ages, whatever you want to call it. It was dark because we did not have any scientific progress at all whatsoever. We did not search for truth. People were living on their little fiefdoms, and they were working the land for several generations. And there were knights and there were kings and there were queens who were deemed to be so by the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church controlled what was true and what was not true. And so there was no need to study or go outside of that. And how did rhetoric survive? I mean, the obvious is that they still had a court system, right? So you still needed lawyers and you still needed teachers for public speaking. So that's useful. The sophists help it keep going. But also St. Augustine, very key and very important, as you know, and I did an entire lecture, I think, on him. And then, of course, we have, sorry about that, my phone's ringing. Of course, in addition to that, we also have, well, I put Margaret Fell in there. She's very late in the Dark Ages, but earlier would be Christine de Pizan. So those two and their contributions are very important and very key. All right, everybody, that's all you need for your exam. We'll come back to the second part of class after the exam is taken, or at least that it's up, and we will catch up again. As always, if you need anything, you have my phone number. Call me, text me, send me an email. But if you send me an email, send me a text, tell me you sent me an email, because a lot of stuff is going to my trash right now. I think that our email servers are so overloaded because of the COVID situation. All right, have a good week. Let me know if you need anything, and we'll talk soon.